And there you see on the left-hand side is the team of Walker, Donegan, and Edgar. And on the right-hand side, Liam Bollard, Ian Bosley, and Marquise Johnson. Marquise Johnson, Mono Black Aggro, Edgar, Magahaes, Bant, Golos. And have I set us up for the entirely wrong match? No, there we go. The arrow has moved. Noah Walker versus Liam Bollard is where we're going to start. And it's Teamer Delver versus Jeskai Mentor.
So you mentioned Noah updating this list.
Mm-hmm.
What I love is that Noah, he never seems in love with the particular 75. He's always shifting. He's water, right? He adapts to the situation. The format's always just churning on.
Yep.
There's always just little evolutions in the format, and he always seems to be right at the front of that. He's never too far ahead. We see people who try to innovate too much. They go a little too far.
Yep.
To me, Noah Walker's the player that's always just right at the front.
I think that's a great assessment. I'm always impressed by Noah's list. And let's talk about the move that Noah's making this week. Stifle, back in the main deck. 4 copies of Stifle. This is a card whose prominence in Legacy comes and goes.
Yep.
But right now, Noah looking for a little bit of aggression out of his Delver deck, wants to constrict his opponent's mana. And I also think you have to be cognizant of Cyrus just winning a Legacy Open with Storm.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, what was the Legacy event he just took down? The Legacy GP.
GP.
Thank you, Craig.
Yes. Vegas, is that right?
That is correct.
I don't know.
Is it?
This is getting embarrassing here.
Well,
okay, it's a GP with Storm.
some GP.
We're almost sure of it.
Listen, I started today by telling people not to listen to the talking heads on the monitor in front of them, and we have done a good job emphasizing that thus far, as we get almost everything wrong. So I gave good advice.
All right. Circling back.
Right.
Noah Walker.
Mm-hmm.
So the last time we saw him playing Legacy, obviously he was still playing Teamer Delver. He had 3 Ren and 6 in his deck. And
Correct.
at that event, I talked to him, and he said, I think the number's just supposed to be 4. The card's that important. It's that much of a problem for a lot of the field. We come to this event a month later. He's playing 2 Ren and 6. He actually went down in numbers. He's moved the Stifles into the deck, and he's playing Hooting Mandrills.
It's a big change. I mean, you have basically redefined your game plan. Previously, you were looking to go long with Ren and 6. Now you're looking for that sheer aggression.
And I believe he had more True Name Nemesis in his deck when he had the Ren and 6, more Ren and 6, which makes sense because you're going to make more land drops.
Of course.
And when you have Stifle in your deck, you want Hooting Mandrills to only come down for 1 or 2 mana so that you still have that extra mana up to play the Stifle in that mid-game if you need to.
I think that's exactly right. Noah, of course, knows all of this. Like I said, Delver Master. And has built his deck to account for all of these things.
So yeah, it's a tight little package that he's put together that makes sense together.
Let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about Jeskai Mentor a little bit. This is kind of a new kid on the block for Legacy. We talked about this maybe supplanting the typical Miracles list we used to see in the past. This looks very stock. This is the Jeskai list we've been seeing. 3 Monastery Mentors, 2 Magmatic Sinkholes as the red cards in the main deck. Answer to Planeswalkers. It all makes sense to me.
Yeah, only 3 Arcum's Astrolabe. Sometimes we see 4. I feel like the opportunity cost on that card is so low.
Right.
That 4 often makes sense, but there's so many powerful things that go on in Legacy that often it's hard to find a spot for one more card that you want in your deck.
I think that's exactly right. Well, things off to a bit of a slow start here. Both players just looking to make some land drops. First play is going to come from Liam Bollard, and it's going to be Brainstorm.
And we're already seeing, like to me, the allure of these Mentor decks, the Jeskai deck or just the 2-color blue-white deck, is that you get to play so many basics. And you just don't worry about Wasteland the same way some of the other decks do.
Yeah, that Wasteland likely to be a blank here. Very easy for Liam to just go get a basic. Also playing around Stifle, responding to Noah's fetch with his own fetch.
Yeah, there's just a lot of these little interactions in Legacy that if you're not familiar with the format, you know, you think people are just cracking fetch lands to get lands, but there's a lot of gameplay here, a lot of decisions being made.
Yeah, every decision matters in Legacy. All those micro decisions, they add up to determine the outcome of the game more often than not. A hearty shuffle given there by Liam Bollard. And now we will resolve this brainstorm. Jace, I think Swords to Plowshares, missed the last card there.
And this Jeskai Mentor deck is a little more threat dense than some of the other control decks that we see. He's got 3 Monastery Mentor, 3 Snapcaster Mage, 2 Jace, 2 Narset, 2 Teferi, which those other Planeswalkers aren't quite threats. They don't win the game for you.
Narset is close to a threat in Legacy, given how many brainstorms are around.
Yeah, it is a problem card that people have to just use a bunch of resources to deal with.
And you see Liam has found Monastery Mentor, the namesake cards of the deck. Noah just going to take a draw. Pass back. Slow start for Noah here, not ideal. I think as the game goes on, Jeskai generally works itself into a better position. More large threats in the Jeskai deck.
Yeah, and just having more lands as resources is going to allow him to make more plays than his opponent.
Here's our first stifle of the match. Cast by Noah Walker on that fetch land. Liam says, no problem, I got another one. Gonna crack Prismatic Vista. Go get a snow-covered plains.
Yeah, and that Stifle effectively acting as a wasteland there. But I like Liam not fighting over it. He's already seen Noah miss some land drops. It seems like Liam has a couple more lands in his hand, a couple of cantrips, so he'll be able to keep making his land drops if he wants to.
Yeah, you see another basic island right there in hand. And it's just time for Monastery Mentor.
I don't like walking into the Daze there.
Noah has it. Going to deploy Daze.
If I'm on Liam's side, you can easily pass the turn there, make another land drop on your next turn, and just play around Daze potentially for the rest of the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in just invalidating that card. I mean, I'm assuming the decision on Liam's part was to set up another play on this turn. So let's see what Liam does here. If he's able to leverage that to, say, a Jace, it looks really smart. But instead, okay, here's 4 mana. Here's a Jace. We're going to try it again. And it's going to get dazed again.
See, and this is exactly what I was saying. If he took a turn off and we were deploying Mentor this turn, potentially he can do the same thing next turn and play the Jace with 1-up. And all of these dazes have to turn into potentially Force of Will fodder.
Right.
Or, Noah has to use multiple dazes to deal with each one of the threats.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with you here, Craig. It's just like, if Noah doesn't get value out of those cards, how does he possibly win this game? And not only that, it's now turned on these Hooting Mandrills, giving Noah a threat. Still a lot of gas in Liam's hand here. See Jace.
Now, I'm going to take the other side this time. If I jam on turn 3 and I jam on turn 4,
you got to jam on turn 5.
You better believe I'm going to jam on turn 5 when I draw another Jace.
You have committed to this style of play at this point.
And your opponent's already used up 2 of the dazes in his deck. The likelihood has gone way down that he has another one.
I agree with you, Craig. Liam does not. Time for Ponder. Still could make a land drop and attempt the play. That's fine.
Yeah, and so I said I would jam, but I don't think taking the turn off here is a big mistake. Maybe he's saying, all right, I walked into Daze a few times. I don't need to do that again. I want to deal with this Hooting Mandrill, so I have a Swords to Plowshares. I can do that this turn. I can do the Ponder this turn, sculpt my hand a little bit, and then revisit this Jace when I can play around Daze.
Looks like we're going to grab Prismatic Vista and just pass the turn back to Noah. Lightning Bolt, Daze, Spell Snare in hand for Noah, I believe. Here is Swords to Plowshares. Noah says that's fine. Noah up to 23. Here's a Tarmogoyf from Noah. Nice follow-up threat. That is going to resolve, and the turn heads back to Liam Bollard. Now with the capacity to deploy Jace, safe from Daze, if he chooses. Do have our first result. Ian Bosley up a game against Dylan Donegan. Amulet Titan versus Urza outcome. Craig, I am happy to report Amulet Titan's back, baby.
It really is. This seems to be, as this event has shaped up, a kind of a classic matchup where these two decks go back and forth. They're both just super powerful, and they've both gotten a little more explosive with the new set.
Mm-hmm. Many Amulet Titan players packing 4 copies of Once Upon a Time. I'm right there with you. Smart decision. Amulet often has had 4 flex slots, really. I think those flex slots are filled. Once Upon a Time did the job. Liam going to deploy Arkham's Astrolabe and just pass the turn back to Noah. So we went hyper-aggressive early. We're hyper-conservative now.
Yeah, and I don't mind him taking the controlling route where he's saying, maybe I want to play around Daze, I want to play around Spell Pierce. I haven't been under a lot of pressure, so I can take that time to do it.
Mm-hmm. And has a nice use of his mana on this turn with Snapcaster Mage. Noah, though, ready with Spell Snare. Perfect answer for that Snapcaster Mage. Does Bollard want to Brainstorm?
So the Snapcaster Mage on the opponent's turn, I think a lot of Legacy players fall into this, where you just feel like you should always cast your spells on the opponent's turn.
Mm-hmm.
I think 100% of the time he's going to be making this play where he Snapcasters, he tries to path the Goyf. There's no reason to pass the turn, give your opponent another draw step, and access to all of their mana. I think Bollard should have done this on his own turn.
Mm-hmm.
And if Noah wanted to fight over this card, he would have had to crack his fetch land, which is another resource that he loses as the game moves on.
These are the decision points, like I said, that are absolutely crucial in Legacy and will ultimately determine the winner of this game.
They're so little, right? These are very small decisions. Does Noah have a fetch land or not? It doesn't seem like a big deal.
So look at this. Noah's going to go ahead and respond to that Brainstorm with Wasteland, forcing Liam Bollard to crack that Prismatic Vista in response if he wants to get a land with it. Noah, though, responding to that crack with his own crack, goes and gets a Volcanic Island. Are we looking at a Stifle as well?
Looks like a Stifle.
No, it's Spell Pierce on the Brainstorm.
Okay.
Very nice sequencing from Noah. That fetch is now going to resolve. And look how many resources Noah squeezed out of Liam there.
Yeah, he really did. We know Liam's hand is still pretty stacked.
Mm-hmm.
But it is impressive just seeing Noah navigate the game in a way where these cards that could potentially just be dead for the rest of the game end up getting a lot of value.
Right.
I mean, really, what was that Wasteland going to do as this game went on?
Almost nothing.
Almost nothing.
Yeah, this was the best usage for it. Now, though, the turn heads back to Liam. 6 mana available, Jason hand. You have to think this is the spot. The unfortunate thing is he'll have to minus right away.
Yeah, you say unfortunate, but it's even better than a Time Walk, right?
You know what, though? He's actually got a land drop left. Doesn't have to minus. Could instead look to Council's Judgment.
Sure, I still like minus. Pass the turn. Next turn, you get to Brainstorm and then Council's Judgment. potentially with counter magic up.
It looks like we're just going to Council's Judgment now on that Tarmogoyf. That's going to get met with a daze. That means we have to minus now. Tarmogoyf returns to hand. Back to Noah's turn. Lightning bolts for the Jace. Noah has played this game so well.
Really has. Yeah, the fact that Liam is now out of resources is just absurd.
Here's that Tarmogoyf again. You are seeing a masterclass on Legacy right now. Here's a good refill for Liam. It is Snapcaster Mage.
And this is an interesting line for him where he says, do I want to go after a Ponder here, or do I just want to go after the Swords to Plowshares?
Big decision for Liam. Just going to pass the turn back. Going to take the hit from this Tarmogoyf, looks like. And Liam's going to fall to 6. Noah just passes the turn back. Liam draws a fetch land.
All right, now we can brainstorm off of it if we want to.
It's interesting.
I'm a little surprised that he didn't make a decision last turn on what he wanted to do with it.
He's just going to pass the turn again here. Here is Snapcaster Mage. Noah's going to go ahead, cast Force of Will on that Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah, and again, Brian, I'm a little frustrated that we gave Noah 2 extra draw steps in order to find either Force of Will or a blue card to go with the Force of Will.
Yep, and Liam's going to fall to 1, draws Council's Judgment at the last moment. Going to go ahead and try and resolve that. Noah's got another Force of Will, and that means Noah Walker wins Game 1 against Liam Bollard. I am awestruck right now.
I mean, it's just so impressive watching Noah navigate these games where it's just like, all right, your opponent has a Mentor, he's got Swords to Plowshares, he's got 2 Jaces, it's just like everything. He makes all of his land drops so, he can play around your soft counter spells, and somehow at the end of the game, Noah's just used almost every possible resource, only has 2 lands in play, almost no cards in his hand, and he crosses the finish line.
If I show you the cards that were seen by both players across that game, you would put a large bet on Liam Bollard winning very, very easily.
Well, and that's why we play the games, right? That's why we say Noah is one of the best in the business when he sits down in the Legacy seat.
Absolutely right. Why don't we head over to our sideboards now, see how these decks are improving in our post-board games. We're going to start over on Noah's side. There you see 2 Blood Moon, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Palace Jailer, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Terminus, 1 Deafening Silence, 1 Wear, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, and finally 1 Hydroblast.
Okay, that's got to be Liam's sideboard.
Yes. These are switched.
Yeah, we have them reversed. No big deal, but just I want to clarify, that's Liam's sideboard that we're looking at on the left side of the screen.
You are correct. All right, so tell us what Liam's going to do.
Taking a look at these sideboards, it's a little difficult. A lot of these cards are quite good in certain spots in the matchup. I really like having a card like Blood Moon, which can just lock out the opponent. Like, once that's on the board, Noah can only cast Lightning Bolts for the rest of the game, right? Like that's so powerful of an effect to have. Some people like Rest in Peace in this matchup. It negates Wrenn and 6. You don't have to worry about that card the same amount. It's going to make Tarmogoyf tiny. It's going to make it so that they can't cast Hooting Mandrills. The problem with these enchantments, though, is that they don't help you when you're already behind. If you're already losing on the board and you're drawing Blood Moon and you're drawing Rest in Peace, you're still in a difficult situation there. So we'll see if he wants those enchantments. Terminus is a powerful effect is when your opponent's path to victory is attacking you with creatures. I can see those coming in. And like the Pyroblast, it's another card where if you're staring down a Hooting Mandrills or a Tarmogoyf, this card is just not very good, but there's times when you're fighting a counter war or you just want to stop a brainstorm, and it's the best possible thing.
High variance cards sitting there in Liam's sideboard. Why don't we head over to Noah's side now, where we are looking at 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Sylvan Library, 1 Ancient Grudge, 1 Dismember, 1 Force of Negation, 2 Pyroblast, 1 Red Elemental Blast, 1 Return to Nature, 1 Submerge, 2 Surgical Extraction, a Vapor Snag, a Renin 6 now hanging out on the sideboard, and finally 1 Caracas.
So I wouldn't make a whole bunch of changes if I'm Noah. I think these type of matchups are what his deck is already tuned for. I like the red Elemental Blast a lot. I like the Sylvan Library some as a way to use his life total as a resource to generate more cards. But beyond that, I don't know if you want this other Force of Negation. So many of the fights happen on Noah's turn,
right?
And Force of Negation isn't good in those situations. So red Elemental Blast, Pyroblast, Sylvan Library. We'll see if Noah wants to make some bigger changes beyond that.
It's interesting to note these decks no longer playing a copy of Crop Rotation. The Caracas stayed. Just a little interesting point. I really liked Caracas with Crop Rotation, less high on it without the card. But let's not forget, this is a blue deck in Legacy. You see a lot of your deck in a given game. If that card's important, you just might be able to go find it.
And when it's not, you can shuffle away with Brainstorm or just not draw it with a Ponder.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good to me. Well, Craig, we've reached one of my favorite points in the broadcast now.
Lunch?
Well, I said one of my favorite points. That's the second one of my favorite points.
Okay.
This is the point where we look at our creature collection, Craig.
Oh, I actually like the creature collection.
And we try to understand it. This one, though, makes perfect sense to me, and it is dope. Bark Shadows, the creature collection in October. You see our little pug vampire there. If you want to get your hands on these tokens and sleeves, you're going to head to Star City Games Game Night. Go.starcitygames.com/game night to get your hands on Bark Shadows.
That is a rotund little dog there.
It is. He's adorable.
His 3-piece suit. How ridiculous.
Love it. Of course, a play on Dark Shadows, popular vampire television show?
Oh, jeez.
Question mark?
Don't go to pop culture with me. You know that's not one of my strong suits.
Question mark? I think that's right. I'm pretty confident in that. I think it was also a movie starring Johnny Depp. Right? Maybe? You just told me you like Johnny Depp before we sat down. We were talking. Oh, well, you at least mentioned Johnny Depp to me, so you got me thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I am the world's
biggest Johnny Depp fan.
Most medium Johnny Depp fan.
Okay. It's an impressive title to hold. Yeah, I feel like Dark Shadows is the type of thing that Tim Burton would love.
Oh, for sure.
Tim Burton, also responsible for one of my favorite movies of all time, Nightmare Before Christmas.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic.
It really is. I like the first Batman movie, too.
Do you watch A Nightmare Before Christmas? You watch it on Halloween.
I just watch it whenever.
Do you watch it on Christmas?
I will watch it anytime.
But do you associate it with both holidays?
I do.
Okay.
I associate it equally with both holidays, and I think that's one of the great things about the movie is that it speaks to both equally well.
It's such a successful crossover of these two very different themes.
Absolutely. Looks like we are ready for some more Legacy action. The play is going to start over on Liam Bollard's side. Has to lead with one of the two dual lands in the deck. Volcanic Island is the play. That could matter a lot. Ponder on turn 1 from Liam Bollard.
So it's a little interesting because the Teamer Delver deck, one of the strategies that they sometimes use is actually siding out all of the wastelands because they're so mediocre in this matchup and just getting even more threat dense or answer dense as it might be. So it's possible if Noah utilizes that strategy that he doesn't even have wastelands in his deck anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, we shall see as the game goes on. Or we may not, Craig, because I have word Edgar is on the ropes against Mono Black Aggro. And it could be that this entire match is decided off camera. We will keep you posted, obviously.
Yeah, it's funny because the Legacy matchups are actually some of the faster ones in the format.
Usually.
And we might just have that rare matchup that finishes before Legacy. The other two matches finish before Legacy.
Yeah, I think we might just try and go over to the standard matchup, because if that is going to determine the outcome here, I certainly want to be there for that. And here we are on the standard matchup. Well, this doesn't look even close to over to me, Craig. This looks like a Witch's Oven and a Priest of Forgotten Gods against a bunch of lands. We'll see how it develops.
Got him to 19 or whatever the case.
I heard, too, that people were just desperate to see more Golos. And I am happy to provide exactly what the people want.
Well, good news for the people. I looked at all of the deck lists. Mm-hmm. This is the only Golos deck that made day 2.
Craig, do you remember that thing I said about not trusting the people telling you things on the screen? This definitely falls into that. I think it's about 50% Golos, quite frankly. Maybe more than that.
Yeah, I actually think it's higher than 50% of the standard decks are Golos decks.
Yep. So you're going to see a lot of this as we check in on standard. But let's not ignore the deck on the other side of the table. Magahaes Johnson playing mono black aggro.
Yeah, and he's playing the Cauldron Familiar Witch's Oven version of the deck.
We talked about this yesterday. I like that version quite a bit.
When the pieces come together, this deck does some pretty absurd things.
Right. We'll have to see. Magahaes can execute his game plan here. Does have Spawn of Mayhem on the battlefield as Edgar just ramps.
Yeah, some of these mythics from the older sets were pushed out by the big card pool in our last standard format.
Right.
They were really powerful cards, but they just weren't quite there to compete with the huge card pool that we had been working with previously. The strategies were just too good. But now that we've got a smaller standard, we're seeing some of these other mythic rares see a lot of play.
Yeah, Spawn of Mayhem in particular seems like one of the best aggro creatures in the format.
Yeah, 3-mana 4/4 flyer that has the potential to get bigger and plinks away at the opponent's life total. Powerful effect.
Here's another powerful effect. It's a Yara, first of Loch Thwain. We saw this card do work yesterday.
Love it.
Yeah, this is a powerful, powerful magic card. That ping, whenever a creature, including the Yara, enters the battlefield, it adds up quickly. Especially when you get Witch's Oven going in conjunction with Cauldron Familiar. You just machine gun your opponents out from nowhere.
Yeah, and Edgar's in the spot where, he's looking at a lot of pressure. He really needs to Wrath of God his opponent here.
Mm-hmm.
But Johnson's still going to get a lot of value where he sacrifices a creature to Yara once it's active.
Well, here's the Realm Cloak Giant, so we're going to beat that.
Okay.
But we are going to get a Priest of Forgotten Gods activation. That means Magahaes gets another card. Edgar takes a little damage. There's going to be some mana floating. I doubt we'll find a use for that. Witch's Oven going to make a food.
But for having a board of all creatures and facing down a Wrath, that's a lot of value to get back.
I agree. That's definitely one of the points of appeal for this mono black deck. Another huge point of appeal for Castle Loch Thwain. You get to be aggressive and have a card advantage engine. Pretty sweet deal for an aggressive deck.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost you anything.
Nope. Here's another Yara. Edgar's going to fall to 10. Edgar did not make a land drop on that turn. Draws again, and I think missed land again. Does have Golos in hand, I believe. Also has Hydroid Krasis. So Edgar's starting to get to the point where he's got a lot of resources. Mm-hmm. Needs to figure out how to prioritize them now. Here's a random look back at the Legacy match. Why not? There's some creatures over on Noah's side. I think this is to let us know that eventually Noah's maybe going to win that match. I kind of suspected that anyway. Here is Golos from Edgar. That's going to grab Field of the Dead. Put a zombie onto the battlefield, meaning Edgar can make some blocks. But the turn is going to pass back to Magahaes Johnson. And like I said, if he just finds Cauldron Familiar, he's going to have access to so much damage so quickly.
It's just a little machine gun where you're drawing extra cards, you're dealing damage, you're gaining life. And it costs you so little to do it.
I can confirm Noah Walker has won the Legacy match, and that means this is going to be the determinative match. The winner here will decide what team moves to very prime position. Here's a great, great follow-up from Magahaes Johnson. It's a Midnight Reaper protecting all of his creatures. Johnson just going to pass the turn back to Edgar. Edgar feeling a lot of pressure right now. Has a big Hydroid Krasis rolled up, has Prison Realm. Plenty of options here. Has another Golos, I believe, as well. Is going to deploy that. That's the starting point. Second Field of the Dead.
Yeah, and I kind of like the chump block last turn where he's not going to get any value, but he's starting to really churn, right? Like he's starting to get lands into play, he's starting to produce zombies, and he's saying, I'm just going to do everything I can to keep my life total high.
That makes sense. Here's Devout Decree on Ayara. Johnson able to respond with Witch's Oven, though. Pretty big. Ensures he gets to draw a card from the Midnight Reaper, puts more food onto the battlefield. Witch's Oven, subtly powerful in these decks.
Yeah, and the food is even effective when you don't have the Cauldron Familiar, because you're taking damage from your Castle Lochthwain, you're taking damage from your Hero's Downfalls. Help me out here, Brian.
Murderous Rider.
Thank you. The Rider, the Midnight Reaper, like all of these cards deal you damage along the way.
Yeah, you don't mind having a little bit of life gain rolled up. Here is another Murderous Rider. That's going to answer that Golos. Makes sense. You don't want that card popping off. Second play for Johnson. It's another Castle Lochthwain, meaning the card advantage engines are online. Got to start forcing some damage through, because pretty soon Edgar's going to scale out of control. You're going to see Hydroid Krasis get real big. More zombies than you could possibly answer.
Yeah, I don't like trading my only creature that is also my card advantage engine with a zombie there.
I agree. So Johnson just going to pass the turn back to Edgar. Big taps, aggressive taps on this Hydroid Krasis. 4/6. 3 cards, 3 life headed Edgar's way.
Still no land.
No land. That's incredible. I don't know if offhand if Edgar's list is 29 or 28 lands, but
either way, I mean,
yeah.
When basically half your deck is land, you don't expect to be missing this many land drops.
You do not. 28 lands for Edgar this week.
It's just not enough.
Yeah, I blame Beanstalk Giant. Somehow this is Beanstalk Giant's fault. I don't know exactly how, but...
Ooh.
Here's a nice little follow-up. It's 2 Cauldron Familiars. They're going to get to draining Edgar. And Johnson with those castles ready to refill. Is going to go ahead and activate one now.
Yep, I like this.
Maybe Edgar's the one who needs to get this game over with in a hurry.
Yeah, it's actually possible, because if Johnson's able to find like an Ayara, these cats, just the damage is really going to start piling up.
Yeah, they will kill Edgar quickly. As it stands now, they just represent so much damage.
And cards.
Absolutely. Yeah, when the engines of this deck come together, it really does impressive stuff. Looks like Edgar with another Krasis in hand. Has Devout Decree. Prison Realm. Maybe thinking about a Prison Realm on Reaper? You just have no good options here, it feels like.
Yeah, I do want to get this Reaper off the board before Magahaes is able to draw too many cards with these cats and the Witch's Oven.
Right. I think you could just see Edgar's frustration right now. He's just like, none of these plays really seem all that promising.
Well, the big thing to me is that he's just missing land drops. Really, if he was just like, hey, I get to make 2 zombies a turn,
right?
At least he gets a clock on the board where he can finish this game out. But missing all these land drops means he's trying to just answer his opponent kind of 1 for 1, and that's a losing battle.
I think that's a great point. Well, here is a Prison Realm attempted on this Midnight Reaper. Edgar kind of trying to bait out Witch's Oven activation here so you can permanently answer a Cauldron Familiar. Let's see if Johnson takes the bait here. Is going to go ahead and activate that witch's oven. Third piece of food onto the battlefield. Draw a card, lose a life. The coast is now clear, though, if Edgar wants to go ahead and devout decree. Oh, Kenrith is the play. Okay.
I actually like that one.
6 damage in the air from Krasis.
And I also like not attacking with my zombies here. Don't put those cats in the graveyard if you can avoid it.
Johnson takes a draw here. If Edgar gets to untap with Kenrith, he'll be able to grow his life total very quickly.
Gain a lot of life and potentially just close out the game. Something like Circuitous Route, tons of zombies. They'd all get haste and trample.
All right. I think Johnson knows that. Goes fishing with Castle Lochduin. Going to fall to 6 here. Well, I see an adventure in hand. A lot of food available. If this is a Murderous Rider and you kill Kenrith, can you survive the next turn? I think the answer is yes. Narrowly. And the 2 Cauldron Familiar both going to be blocked here. I think Johnson is completely fine with that. Order of Midnight. Going to buy back a Yara. Play Yara. 1 damage to Edgar. Johnson gains a life. Has 4 more damage rolled up in the form of those cats.
Yep, gaining a bunch more life.
Gain 4 life. Okay.
And he can do it one more time, sacrificing a cat to the oven, which just sounds so cruel when it comes out of my mouth.
Doesn't sound particularly nice.
But that's the flavor that they were going for when they made the cards.
Edgar, though, has gotten to untap with Kenrith, gets a Golos, uses the Golos to make a bunch of zombies, and then says, Kenrith, give my entire team haste and trample. That's enough to kill you. And Johnson says, we're going to do some math here. Double check. But I think this is...
Yeah, it's way over the top.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows you why these decks have the 1 of or 2 of Kenrith in them.
Certainly showing its power here. And that is going to do it. Edgar evens up this match at 1 game apiece, and that means we're going to be playing a 3rd and final game to determine who's going to take down this match.
Super close, that game. Very entertaining.
Absolutely. I think the mono black aggro deck is probably a little underappreciated in this format right now. We've seen it shine a couple of times on camera this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, there we saw the Golos deck miss some land drops in some unlikely spots where it generally would not miss land drops.
Right.
And that was big in the matchup, but the Bant Golos deck was still able to pull it out just on the backs of just way more powerful cards.
Golos just trying to survive long enough to get those powerful cards online. Just want to talk briefly about sideboard. We won't do the full dive here, but if you're over on Magahaes Johnson's side, I think you're really interested in your drill bits. It's nice that they're able to take away a Realm Cloak Giant where Duress is not, but you're still bringing in Duress. I think that's a powerful option here. Spawn of Mayhem we saw in that match. I'm assuming that's to avoid the zombie blockers.
Oh, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Those cards all seem promising. Meanwhile, over on Edgar's side, what are you looking to do here? I think it's mostly about Devout Decree, which Edgar has 3 copies of. You could also get a Time Wipe. All sounds good.
Yeah, all of these effects that kind of just deal with what the opponent's doing. We saw the Prison Realm was in there. It's nice because it exiles the creature. It doesn't actually kill it, so you don't get some of the triggers off of creatures when you Prison Realm the opponent.
Right.
A card like Veil of Summer is interesting. It's very tempting when the opponent's playing a mono black deck, but I think ultimately that's not a card that you want in your deck waiting for the right situation to come up where it's good.
Right. Yeah, I think proactivity is just king in Standard right now, and trying to be reactive is often problematic, costs you points elsewhere that you don't necessarily see right away, but I really like keeping a proactive stance in so many matchups. I wonder if Edgar has to give consideration to an answer for Witch's Oven. It's mostly just like Assassin's Trophy, which doubles as another removal spell. Worth considering. Witch's Oven is a tough card to deal with. It generates so much value over the course of a game. But with 4 copies in Marquise's deck, I think it's just like he's going to get it eventually. You can't really deny him access to that engine.
Well, we saw the Oven that game. There was more food on the board than got used when the game ended.
That is true.
So it's possible you say he needs to have the Oven and the Cauldron Familiar in order for it to be a problem. Mm-hmm. And even then, he needs to combo it with one of the other creatures, one of the rares, a Yara or the Midnight Reaper, in order for it to really generate a lot of value. And I think if you're on Edgar's side of the board, you say, I'm going to be able to mitigate the game in a way where not all of this stuff comes together for more than a turn, so I'm not going to worry about the Oven.
Okay. I like that approach. That makes a bunch of sense to me. I think this is a matchup we're going to have to continue to hash out and understand as time goes on. It will likely be a pillar of Standard. If you want to hash out and understand all the matchups of Standard, no better place to do it than, of course, Versus Live, which I would generally send you to an ad for, but it looks like we have Magic.
Bang.
So
No,
real quick, Versus Live. Versus Live. Go watch Versus Live. Now we're going to watch Magic instead. Players chomping at the bit. Couldn't wait to go ahead and deploy their spells. Growth Spiral for Edgar. The ramping has started.
Oh, yeah.
On Johnson's side, a slower start, but we saw this before, Craig, and we bemoaned a slower start from the mono black deck. The raw aggression, though, isn't really what this deck is about. It needs to put together some engines.
Well, in one of the previous matches, we saw it against a blue, black, white control deck, right?
Right, Esper Hero.
Yeah, and we thought it was better if he got on the board kind of aggressive, but the black deck was able to just generate so much card advantage. I think in this matchup, it's not the same thing. I think the Golos deck is so much bigger in the late game that you need to be pressuring their life total right away.
Right. Okay. Well, let's see how this plays out. Edgar going to go ahead and cast a Beanstalk Giant, looking real nice here, able to put in an untapped land, allow a Growth Spiral, and now Edgar already 6 lands on the battlefield. Golos rolled up, too.
Yeah, he's doing everything here, right?
Yep. Feel of the Dead in hand, too. Edgar's going to make a lot of zombies real quick. A big turn, though, from Johnson. Midnight Reaper attack into Spawn of Mayhem. Witch's Oven, backing all that up. But here's Golos grabbing Field of the Dead. Like I said, second Field of the Dead in hand for Edgar. 3 zombies all day. Arboreal Grazer. Do we have access to our Golos mana? We do. So could be looking at a Golos activation next turn if Johnson doesn't have an answer. Step 1, attack with Spawn.
It's a little funny that he didn't deploy the Grazer there. I think he's saying, potentially I get a Crassus and I draw multiple lands. I want to make multiple land drops in the turn.
Generally, you're incentivized to hold your Grazers in this spot.
But on the flip side, if all you're doing is trying to keep your life total high, the Grazer has reach.
You can make that block in the future, though, right? You don't have to make it on that turn, and you can get a little bit more information before you do so. Here's that Crassus.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he had that or if he drew it, but yeah, it's all working out at this point, right?
Yep. 3 life, 3 cards in hand, and Edgar ready to get aggressive. The zombies are rumbling in alongside Golos. What a world when the grindy inevitability deck can still kill you on like turn 6 with just a horde of zombies.
It's just absurd. Like, well, yeah, you make a land drop and you get 4 power or 6 power out of it, and you want to be casting super expensive spells, so you want to make all these land drops that give you the zombies along the way. It's just kind of crazy.
So now Johnson very clearly on the back foot.
Yeah, and he's in this awkward spot where he doesn't have a lot going on with his Witch's Oven, so he's thinking about cashing in one of his creatures right here because he needs more cards to answer some of these other things happening on the other side of the board. But then he loses. Like that 3-drop was the first thing he played this game.
Right.
Losing it as a resource just feels so painful.
Well, look, it's not going to accomplish anything on this battlefield. certainly not pushing any damage through. If you're Johnson, you need to think about what a game you win looks like. It's not about how good are my cards. It's about what possible combination of things happening can get me back into the mix here.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. The point I'm making is if this is the hand we kept,
maybe that was the decision.
Yeah, where our 3-drop is a card that like we're gonna have to be sacrificing later for almost negligible value.
Right.
Yeah, maybe we needed a different hand, or maybe the strategy just isn't where we want to be in the metagame.
Or maybe we should have played Golos is the answer.
That's yes. No. You got.
Don't want me to encourage that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was about to say, maybe Golos is the best deck. No one should be playing it.
Okay. Nobody play the best deck.
We can all just have this truce, right? Where everyone agrees that we just won't play Golos.
Sure. That'll definitely work out. Nobody will violate that truce.
What are you saying? You're not a man of honor?
I'm a very honorable person, Craig. I don't have the same faith in my fellow competitors to leave an edge sitting out there. Here's a Legion's End from Johnson. That's going to go ahead and answer Krasis. We see a hand pretty loaded with gas, though. Growth Spiral, a Boreal Grazer, land, Once Upon a Time.
It's funny to call a hand that's like a land, an 0-3, and an instant that can play another land, like loaded.
I know, but that's the thing, is that Field of the Dead makes all of your cards loaded. Like, everything you can do is unbeatable at this point.
It is loaded.
Once Upon a Time, going to find a huge threat, I'm sure.
And we had to use the Legion's End. Maybe he has another one, but nope. We had to use the Legion's End on the flyer instead of the army of zombies.
Yeah. Well, Spawn of Mayhem going to fly over, do a bit of damage. Edgar takes a draw.
No messing around.
Looks like Johnson does want to get that Golos off the battlefield. We'll fall to 1 with these blocks, I believe. Edgar thinking about whether he wants to activate, possibly.
A lot of shrugging back and forth.
The block is going to happen.
Oh, I think it was a question of whether or not the oven was going to be activated.
Gotcha. Here's another
he drew
for
it.
6.
That one's extra awkward. When you Legion's End,
yep,
they don't have it.
Decent draw. Here's a Boreal Grazer. Going to put 2 lands onto the battlefield.
Gain some life.
4 more zombies.
What a disaster.
Johnson's going to take a draw here, but he drew with the air of a defeated person. And he has, in fact, been vanquished. And that is going to do it. The team of Walker, Donegan, Magahaes moving on to 10-1 right now. Golos looking as ridiculous as always down in our feature match area this round. And Craig, it's starting to feel like every time I see a non-Golos deck in the feature